it's Anna, welcome back to my channel. So today I thought I would talk about how I choose books. So how I decide what I want to read, what I want to invest my time in, I guess, and or money in most cases. So I have a few examples here that I'll just sort of go with, but yeah, there are heaps. So firstly, I know everybody says don't judge a book by its cover, and that's true enough. Some of my favourite books have terrible covers. An example of this is Howl's Moving Castle by Diana Wynne Jones. I love the book. I really don't like the cover at all. So, that being said, I have a sort of hierarchy, I guess. Like, I have an order that sort of helps me decide. And obviously, the biggest thing to start with is the cover. Like, if I'm faced with a beautiful cover like this, which is shiny and gorgeous and probably blinding you, or, you know, 9 times out of 10, I'm gonna go for this one first. Actually, no, pretty much 10 times out of 10. Like, just because I like the cover, though, doesn't mean that that's the only thing that determines whether I'm going to read a book. The cover just helps get my attention to start with. So, beautiful covers like these, especially if they have shiny bits on them, apparently. Even this, it's got shiny, are very attractive to me. I also quite like colour blocking, I guess is what it's called, but the black, white and red is also a particular favourite. So those are things that will sort of attract me. I really do like a pretty cover. But that being said, there are other things that I take into account. Things like the title. An example, yeah, that I have right here is Strange the Dreamer. Like, it's intriguing. Like, that is a weird kind of title. It's got a pretty cover. It has an interesting title. I'm more likely to pick it up and go, oh yeah, what's this actually about? Like this book, for example. This was one of those covers that I just went, yes. Mum was wheeling me past one in my wheelchair at the airport. I'm not very good with airplanes. There's a lot of fainting involved. A lot of low blood pressure. It's very dangerous. So, wheelchairs. Mum's wheeling me past the bookshop and I'm like, ooh. So, I didn't buy a physical copy at the time. I just wrote it down and looked it up online when I got home. But yeah, for me, cover was what attracted me. The title means absolutely nothing to me at this point, so title's not really a factor. That's when I get to the synopsis slash blurb, or whatever you want to call it. So, for this one, the people of Kaya die in pairs. When one lover dies, the other does too. So it has been for thousands of years, until Ava. So, that immediately is, I'm going, oh, that's unusual. I'd like to know more. And obviously there's a big, long kind of blurb, synopsis thing. And yeah, the rest of that was interesting enough that I went, yep, I'm going to buy this and I'm going to read it. It's one of my favourite series now. The Chronicles of Kaya by Charlotte McConaughey. So a synopsis is another thing that I use to decide whether or not I'm, interested. After that, if I'm still not sure after all of those things, I generally have a look at the Goodreads rating, like the one where it says, oh, this many people have rated it, and here's the breakdown of, how many people rated it 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, or 0 stars. And I look at that. I look at the actual number, so sometimes it's like 3.98, and that's the average rating. But if there are heaps and heaps and heaps of people that rated it 5 stars, and then a whole bunch of people that rated it like 3 stars, I go, okay, well, having an almost 4-star average is pretty good. That says to me that, especially if there are a lot of people having rated it, so I'm like, okay, thousands of people can't be wrong, there must be something to it. And I do look at the breakdown, because if you don't have many people that are rating it and it gets a lot lower rating, like it's only in like the 2, I try to only read things generally that are like above an average of 3, but sometimes things, in the early days, or if they're not that popular or whatever, are a bit lower. If there are people that are singing its praises, I'm like, okay, we'll have a look. The next thing I do is I generally read the sample. I have a look at the first page. If the first page is interesting, I do a lot of reading on Kindle, so I go to Amazon. I read the first page on the website sample. If I'm interested at that point, I send myself a sample on my Kindle and I read the whole sample. Maybe not then and there, because I have quite a lot of samples that are just sitting there waiting. But that will generally decide whether or not I'm going to put my time into it. That's one of the biggest things. And I have to get through all of these other points, like, oh, pretty cover, oh, interesting title, oh, that's a really interesting premise, oh, other people think that, this isn't, a piece of crap, or terribly, like, flawed. Yep, I'll give it a go. Like, so I have to go through all that process before I get to reading the first bit and the sample, and then deciding whether or not to purchase, or whether to... I don't actually have a library. Number, whatever. I mean, I do, but I got it like 20-something years ago, and they updated their system since then. Honestly, I didn't think my library had anything recent. But turns out they're into ebooks now, so I'm like, when I eventually get myself out of the house, I'll actually go get membership, account, whatever. So, yeah. And finally, one other thing that may tempt me to read a book that perhaps, I've got to the sample point and I'm still going, yeah, like I'm not sure. It's at that point that recommendations or good reviews on YouTube or BookTube or whatever kind of come into play. Like if I see a book, everywhere, and a lot of people are saying, yeah, it's actually really, really good, I'll go, okay, I'll give it a go. An example of this is Throne of Glass by Sarah J. Maas. I've never been interested in reading this, ever. When it first came out, because I didn't have this long convoluted way of choosing books back then, it was really just whatever popped up on Amazon saying, oh, you've read this book, other people also buy this book. You know, so back in those days, I wasn't that interested. And even up until a couple months ago, I was still just like, nah, I'm not that interested. Like, the cover didn't really get me in. Throne of Glass, okay, whatever title. The synopsis apparently wasn't that interesting because it's been however many years and I never chose to read it. I was aware that it had quite good ratings on Goodreads, but yeah, just not that interested. But, and I apparently read the sample at some point, because, you know, when I re-downloaded the sample, I was like 53% of the way through, and I was like, oh, I must have started reading this at some point. But it was really YouTube. It's your fault, guys. Your fault. That sort of made me go, okay, I will give it a go. Like, it cannot be so beloved by so many people if it is terrible. So, it's on my very large TBR now. Seriously, that my TBR is like 100 books long, like, at least. And that's actual books that I have purchased and are sitting on my Kindle or on my bookshelf waiting to be read. That's not just like on Goodreads, oh yeah, that sounds good, I might read that one day. Nope, these are the ones that I've actually paid money for. So, that's how I, choose my books. So if you guys have any thoughts or are swayed or influenced by anything in particular, especially if it's different to all the stuff that I've just babbled about, let me know in the comments section below. If you like my video, give me a thumbs up. If you like me, subscribe to my channel. Yeah, I think maybe one day that'll work. Probably not. So, thank you for watching, and I hope to see you again.